On August 26, 1777, General George Washington, General Nathanael Greene, and the Marquis de Lafayette went to the top of Iron Hill in Newark, Delaware. This event has been captured in a painting that was done by Stanley Arthurs in the early 20th century. But why was Washington on Iron Hill? What did he hope to accomplish? And how did his visit here impact the course of the war? To answer that question, we have to go back just a little over a month to July 23, 1777. It was on this day that the commanding general of the British Army, William Howe, had over 18,000 soldiers aboard 265 ships in the Raritan Bay just south of New York City. The fleet of ships was under the overall command of William's brother, Richard Howe. The Howe brothers had one objective: to capture the colonial capital of Philadelphia. The idea was that they'd head south, land the British Army, and march overland to take the colonial capital city. With that in mind, the British Army set sail on July 23, 1777, to attempt to do just that. The fleet sailed down the New Jersey coastline, around the Virginia Capes, and then up into the Chesapeake Bay, and finally up the Elk River. 18,000 British troops would land on August 25, 1777, at a spot 5 miles south of present-day Elkton, Maryland. The trip had been arduous. Not only did the troops have to deal with heat, but also severe thunderstorms, rough seas, and food shortages. Lightning struck a few of the ships during the voyage. When the British did finally land, 27 men had died during the voyage. 170 horses had also died, and about 150 horses disembarked totally unfit for service. Here is a period map showing not only the landing site in a cove, but also the British troop encampments after they landed, including General Howe's headquarters. Meanwhile, during most of early August, General George Washington was in a state of confusion as to where the British fleet were headed. Washington desperately needed this information to know where to march the Continental Army. Messages went up and down the coastline, and people like Henry Fisher from Lewes, Delaware, had spotted the fleet just off the coast of Cape May and would send intel by horseback, which would eventually reach George Washington. But there was a lot of conflicting reports. It became a bit comical after a while. Howe was definitely headed south, but perhaps it was a trick, and he was really headed north. But then maybe he was headed south. Nobody seemed to know. As John Adams humorously put it, "What this man is after, no wisdom can discover." Finally, General Washington was convinced, in fact, that the British fleet was headed south and put his army in motion. On August 24, 1777, the Continental Army marched through Philadelphia and arrived in Wilmington, Delaware on August 25, 1777, the same day that the British Army were landing at Elk Ferry. So now we are all caught up. And to answer the question as to why General Washington, Greene, and Lafayette went to the top of Iron Hill on August 26, 1777, it was, of course, to view the British landing. You see, Iron Hill is only 13 miles from where the British landed and has a prominence of over 200 feet. General Washington believed it was a high enough spot to see the British landing. General Washington also went over to Gray's Hill, which is about 3 miles south of Iron Hill, to see if he could get an even better view of the landing site. General Washington wrote in his correspondence, "I this morning returned from Head of Elk, where I left last night. In respect to the enemy, I have nothing new to communicate. They remain where they debarked first. I could not find out from inquiry what number has landed, nor form an estimate from the distant view I had of their encampments. But few tents were to be seen from Iron Hill and Gray's Hill." So it appears as though General Washington did in fact see with his own eyes the landing from both Iron Hill and Gray's Hill. This is important because after a month of conflicting intel, correspondence, and confusion as to where the British were headed, General Washington saw for himself that the British had in fact landed and were intent on taking Philadelphia. I can only imagine what was going through his mind at this exact moment when he knew what was coming and the massive amount of work that would lay ahead as General Washington and his army attempted to stop the British invasion. It would be great to confirm today that you can see the Elk River from Iron Hill, but unfortunately trees have grown up on the hill and there's no way to go up there and see the view for yourself. However, with drone technology, now we can confirm that George Washington's correspondence was correct, and that you can in fact see the Elk River from the top of Iron Hill. If you still aren't convinced, here is a shot from the British landing, clearly showing both Iron Hill and Grays Hill in the distance. I usually kayak out to the British landing site every year on the anniversary. So this bit of land here where the trees are would have been Elk Ferry, and the British would have come up this way, and they would have landed right here, 18,000 troops. And if you pan off to the north here, you can clearly see Grays Hill right there, and then if you look just to the right of that little bit of land in the distance there, that is actually the very top of Iron Hill. And so that's where Washington would have viewed this landing from. And this is a really cool spot. Not a lot of people get to come out here, but it's definitely historically important.